Namaste. This lecture is going to be engaged with the topic of Sankhya in the Bhagavad Gītā. We're going to be discussing Sankhya and particularly the special potential of the guna doctrine or the guna concept in the Bhagavad Gītā, a very interesting topic which has an immense philosophical potential. Sankhya, no doubt, occupies a central position in the Bhagavad Gītā. In the Sankhya system, the universe of animate and inanimate entities is perceived as ultimately the product of two ontologically distinct categories, and hence the system is quintessentially Dvaita or dualistic in presupposition. These two categories are Prakriti, or the primordial material matrix of the physical universe, the undifferentiated plenitude of being, and Purusha, the innumerable conscious souls or selves embedded within it. Although the Sankhya is to be found in abundance in the Bhagavad Gītā, this lecture focuses, as I mentioned, on one central Sankhya concept, which is the guna doctrine. In essence, the guna doctrine is a theoretical system categorizing the world in terms of Sankhya metaphysics expressed through ontology, epistemology, and ethics in a universal and humanistic fashion. The guna doctrine is developed in the Bhagavad Gītā to a wide extent and occupies a central place in its philosophy. It appears in various chapters and in various contexts. Seen from the second story's perspective, the intermediate stage, the embodied being should transcend the gunas on its path to liberation. However, the Gita also offers a first story, a humanistic interpretation of the gunas, and as such, the present lecture will focus on the Gita chapters 14, 17, and 18, which develop this notion. A notion that, as I mentioned, could be also considered, developed further, and could be considered spiritual humanism. The guna doctrine has much potential for further development into a more systematic philosophy, a philosophy of everything, as some scholars say, as it intertwines theoretical metaphysics with pragmatic ethics. Moreover, despite the underlying soteriological nature of Sankhya, the guna doctrine can be taken as secular, that is, categorizing the world in terms of metaphysics and ethics in a universal and humanistic fashion. In many ways, the guna doctrine is compulsory for articulating the Gita's philosophy, as it completes the ethical ladder by offering the term dharma deeper dimensions. This is so as the ethical ladder is grounded in dharma and calls for a sublimation in the adherence to one's dharma. The guna doctrine underlies the term dharma as it relates one's svabhava, one's nature, to one's dharma. In other words, one's svabhava is defined by the constitution of one's gunas, and one's svadharma is defined by one's svabhava. The gunas determine one's nature, and dharma springs from one's nature. As such, the guna doctrine is deeply related to the Varna system of social classification. As in the Gita's version of the gunas and the Varnas actually emanate from the gunas or from one's svabhava. Underlying the guna doctrine is a call for ethical sublimation, a gradual elevation from tamas to rajas and from rajas to sattva. The guna ethics call for an elevation to the state of sattva guna, or the mode of goodness, that may have a wide ethical implications. Sattva guna represents, among other things, values of anti-consumerism, simple living, environmental sensitivity, sustainability, and a mode of humanistic spirituality. Let us open the 14th chapter and ask for or look into a general exposition of the guna doctrine. So I'm sharing screen and reading from the 14th chapter. Goodness, passion, and darkness are the three gunas originating from the material nature. They bind the embodied eternal living entity, Almighty Arjuna. Among these goodness, because it is untainted, illuminated, and purifies, because it is untainted, illuminates, and purifies, and binds one through attachment to happiness and knowledge. Osinus Arjuna. Know that passion is characterized by desires. It arises from craving and attachment, and it binds the embodied soul through attachment to action. O Kuntiya, know that darkness is born of ignorance, and that it deludes all embodied souls. O Bharata, it binds through negligence, indolence, and sleep. Goodness attaches one to happiness. Passion attaches one to activity, O Bharat, whereas darkness, concealing knowledge, causes attachment to heedlessness and madness. So this is a preliminary, fundamental, basic exposition of the gunas. And let us look deeper into that. Here, material nature or prakriti, comprising the three gunas, is described. Although the term guna is at times translated as quality, a deeper look will reveal that the concept of the gunas is somewhat subtle, and that these are not mere qualities, but entities or substances that have the ability of binding the living beings to gross and subtle matter. The scholar Nicholas Sutton notes that the gunas are described as being prakriti sambhava, meaning born from or arising out of prakriti. So that's a notion. At any rate, the gunas do not merely characterize the subtle and gross nature of the living being, but they also actively confine it in various types of bonds. As such, each guna binds the living entity in a particular fashion. Goodness binds through attachment to knowledge and happiness. Passion binds through attachment to activity and its fruits, and darkness binds through illusion, indolence, and madness. Let us look deeper or further into the text. Goodness prevails when it overcomes passion and darkness, O Bharat. Similarly, passion prevails by overcoming goodness and darkness by overcoming goodness and passion. When all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge, it is to be known that the influence of goodness increases and dominates. Among the Bharatas, when passion is dominant, greed, vigorous activity, venture, restlessness, and yearning are born. All descend of Kuru. When darkness is dominant, obscurity, inertia, insanity, and confusion are born. So, a possible way to which to understand the ontology of the gunas is through their Chinese counterparts. As it seems that terms yin and yang are close in many ways to the gunas, in that they are explanatory categories characterizing the relationships and interactions among immediate, concrete, and particular phenomena and things of the world. Yin and yang describe the relationships that are constitutive of unique particulars and provide a vocabulary for capturing various subtleties. The complementary nature of the opposition captured in this pairing express the mutuality, interdependence, diversity, and creative efficacy of the dynamic relationships that are deemed immanent in and valorize the world. The full range of differences in the world is deemed explicable through this pairing of yin and yang. So I'm offering a comparison between the gunas and these Chinese terms yin and yang. The working of the gunas is somewhat unsteady, and at different times various combinations of the gunas prevail. The dominance of a particular guna can be ascertained according to various symptoms. As such, when the body gates are controlled apparently in a yogic manner, it is understood that the guna of goodness prevails. Restlessness and hankering are symptoms of passion guna, and laziness, confusion, and insanity indicate the guna of darkness, darkness's presence. The text continues, and I'm sharing the screen. When the embodied soul meets death influenced by the goodness, it attains the pure worlds of those possessing the highest knowledge. When it meets death under the influence of passion, it is born among those attached to activity. And when it meets death under the influence of darkness, it is reborn among the witless animals. So here we have a description of what happens at the time of death according to one's conditioning by the gunas. So the gunas, they not only confine but pave a kind of existential path for each and every embodied entity. Accordingly, each entity progresses in a more or less predetermined path defined by the gunas by which it is bound. In that sense, the gunas may be taken as a kind of universal road navigating the living entity within samsara. In other words, being conditioned by a certain guna combination, the living entity acts in a certain way, receives consequential karma, and as such remains in the same guna state. One's state at the time of death is also ascertained by the gunas, and accordingly the next birth is determined. Goodness leads to the higher planets, passion leads to birth among those who work with a deep aspiration for the fruits of their work, and darkness leads to the animal birth, which is naturally more ignorant and obscure. Now we'll move further on to look into the guna's relation to actions and the linking of metaphysics and ethics. Metaphysics, what are the gunas, and ethics, how should one behave in this world? The guna doctrine is philosophically interesting inter alia as it combines metaphysics and ethics in a unique and innovative way. On the one hand, it is a metaphysical theory, as it aspires to offer an ontology of existence and as such deconstruct the world of phenomena into its basic ingredients, which are the three gunas. On the other hand, it develops an ethical theory based on these categories. The text continued to look at the gunas in terms of the consequences of actions. Now we're looking at the doctrine of action according to the gunas. Again, 14th chapter, verse 16. It is said that an action well performed results in a spotless fruit of the nature of goodness, but passionate action brings suffering. An action of the nature of darkness brings with it ignorance and foolishness. From goodness arises knowledge. From passion, greed alone arises. And from darkness, only negligence, illusion, and ignorance arises. Those established in goodness go upwards. Those established in passion remain in the middle state, and those who are established in the lowest guna condition, in darkness, they go downward. So that is a different perspective on the topic, which may be gained by examining an action through its fruit or outcome. An action that results in a spotless result is by nature influenced by goodness. An action that results in some type of suffering is an action in passion. And an action resulting in foolishness must have been performed under the influence of the lowest guna. that of darkness. Another way of examining the gunas is by saying that knowledge arises from the guna of goodness. Greed arises as a result of the passion guna, and ignorance arises as a result of the darkness guna. The principle of universal progress is again confirmed by stating that those in goodness progress upwards, apparently to higher planets or to higher births. Those in passion remain in the middle, and those in darkness descend to lower species or lower planets. Having provided preliminary exposition of the gunas, the text now ascends to the second story vision. Now we're going to see it from a higher point of view. And sharing screen. And when once the wise one beholds no other agent performing actions save the gunas, and knows that which is above the gunas, he attains my state of being, Krishna says. When the embodied soul transcends these three gunas that originate in the body, it becomes liberated from birth, death, old age, and misery, and attains the nectar of immortality. So this is a second story vision, which is a higher vision. Okay, now I will progress a little further and look deeper into the gunas from the humanistic point of view, or what we call first story, not second story, but first story. I'm reading now chapter 17. The Blessed Lord said, embodied souls are three kinds of faith originating from their nature. And these are goodness, passion, or darkness. And darkness, yeah. Hear then of them, O Bharat. One's faith, Shraddha, is according to his essential nature. As human being is composed of faith. Indeed, whatever his faith is, that's what he is. Very interesting statement, very important statement. This is no doubt an important development in the philosophy of the Gita, as the text is now entering a first story or humanistic discussion of human nature. In other words, the discussion now commencing is entirely humanistic and confined to the first story. As such, it does not assume the existence of the soul, nor the Vedantic aspiration of freeing the Atman from samsara, or nor the divinity of Krishna. It offers not only an ontology of human nature, but lays the foundation for a universal doctrine of ethics, a universal doctrine of ethics based upon the guna doctrine alone. So that is a very interesting and important development in the study of the Bhagavad Gita. So now let's look deeper into these humanistic descriptions of the gunas, i.e., which persons conditioned by which gunas, or how do they behave? How do different persons conditioned by different gunas behave? So let's look at religion. Persons of goodness worship the gods. Persons of passion worship yakshas and rakshas, whereas those of darkness worship ghosts and spirits. Now, austerities. The hearts of those who practice dreadful austerities not ordained by the scriptures are filled with hypocrisy and egotism, as they are motivated by lust and attachment. Those fools who torture the aggregate of elements in their bodies, as well as me, who dwell therein, know them to have a demonic resolution. Moreover, the food that all do like is of three kinds, and similarly divide our sacrifice, austerity, and charity. All these are divided by the gunas. Here, two of these. Food preferred by persons of goodness increase this lifespan, strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. It is tasty, mild, substantial, and pleasant to the heart. Food desired by men of passion is pungent, sour, salty, too hot and dry, scorching and burning, and causes suffering, misery, and disease. Food dear to persons of darkness is stale, tasteless, and putrid, consisting of leftovers and abominations. So this is a more detailed discussion of the gunas and their expressions in various aspects of human life. First, we hear a critique of religious practices, and that looks into the kind of worship people do. Then austerities are examined, and it follows that not every austerity is undertaken is in goodness. Rather, there are austerities in passion and darkness as well. And then the subject of food, very important, provides a very basic measure for characterizing human nature according to the gunas. Since everyone eats some kind of food, according to the gunas, food of nature of goodness is composed of vegetables, beans, fresh milk, and fruits. Food in passion is also vegetarian, but is spicy and less delicate, such as fried foods, sorts of cheese, and mixed nuts, whereas food categorized as dark is composed of meat, fish, eggs, and alcoholic drinks. This is tamasic food. Now let's quote the scholar Nicholas Sutton. He establishes, he speaks about the topic of sattvic and rajasic food. So this is Nicholas Sutton writing, and he writes that sattvic food is what we might today call the healthy option. It is food that prolongs life and brings good health, as well as making the body fit, active, and invigorated. The science of Ayurveda contains a detailed analysis of food types, but on the basis of what Krishna says here, we must presume that fresh fruit and vegetables, whole grains, and other forms of light, nutritious food can be taken as sattvic. Rajasic foods seem to be those that are very strong, tasting, salty, and pungent. Perhaps in a modern supermarket, they would be heavily processed foods, industrialized, that contain unsaturated fats and are hard to fully digest. So that is a very important discussion, as it offers a mirror, metaphysical mirror, enabling self-examination of in terms of one's gunas. I see what I eat, I understand what my gunas are. Now, here's a further development of the ethical theme, and now we have categories of sacrifice, austerity, and charity, and I continue reading. Sacrifice, offered without interest in its fruits, performed according to scripture and out of deep sense of duty and conviction that it should be performed, is of the nature of goodness. But the sacrifice performed with its fruits in mind, out of hypocrisy and for the purpose of ostentation. Know that sacrifice to be of the nature of passion, or Besa the Bharatas, the sacrifice performed in neglect of scriptural injunctions, and without distributing food, without the chanting of mantras of the nations of the Brahmins, and without faith, is said to be of the nature of darkness. Worship of the gods, of Brahmins, of teachers and wise men, as well as purity, honesty, celibacy, and non-violence, are said to be the austerity of the body. Words that do not agitate others and are truthful, pleasant, and beneficial, as well as constant recitation of scriptures, are said to be the austerity of speech. Peace of mind, gentleness, silence, self-control, and purification of one's existence are said to be the austerity of the mind. This threefold austerity is said to be of the nature of goodness when performed with deep faith by persons disciplined through yoga, expecting no fruit in return. Austerity is said to be of the nature of passion when hypocritically performed for the sake of winning and reverence, honor and distinction. It is ephemeral and unstable. Austerity is said to be of the nature of darkness when performed out of obscure notions and self-torture, or with the aim of harming others. Charity is held to be of the nature of goodness when the gift is bestowed upon one who has not performed any a prior service. with a sense of duty and conviction that it ought to be given, and when offered at the proper place, at the proper time, and to a worthy person. But when charity is given in expectation of some gain, with its fruits in mind, or offered grudgingly, that gift is considered to be of the nature of passion. That charity given at the wrong time and place to an unworthy person, without paying respect and with contempt, is said to be of the nature of darkness. So, all very, very interesting. And now the text emphasizes the guna's internal aspects as opposed to the external ones, underlying their initial descriptions. Previously, the description given was that goodness is serene, passion is active, and darkness is drowsy. Now, the description emphasizes the inner attitude of the agent performing action rather than the external characters mentioned or characteristics mentioned. Very, very interesting. I'll repeat that. Previously, the description given was that goodness is serene, passion is active, and darkness is drowsy. Now, the description emphasizes the inner attitude of the agent performing action rather than the external characteristics mentioned. This internalization examines the agent's various motives or internal states of mind and classifies them according to their position within the three gunas. Moreover, implicit in the system is a call for sublimation, that is, raising one's internal attitude from tamas to rajas and from rajas to sattva, thus aiming at a moral refinement. The question now under discussion is not whether one should offer sacrifices, undergo austerities, or give charity, but instead in what mood and how should these acts be performed internally. Phrased differently, the question now raised is, by what motive should action be performed? As such, each and every action could possibly be performed in three different ways: in goodness, in passion, and in darkness. Each mode of action has its implications, and the conclusion is that acting in goodness is the recommended course. So I hope you can follow this move here from the external to the internal. Not only the external description of the gunas, but the internal mood, the internal motive by which one performs action. That determines the gunas. The text cites the first, to sacrifice, to austerity of the body and mind, and to charity. Apparently, all these are within the framework of dharma. For example, charity is a dharmic practice when performed with a sense of duty and offered at the proper place, proper time, and to a worthy person. It is sattvic. When given in expectation of some gain or often grudgingly, it is rajasic. And when given at the wrong time and place and with contempt, it is tamastic. In general, dharma is associated with the Mimamsa school, a surrealistic school. The Mimamsa main interest was practical rather than speculative. However, here we can see a clear link between Sankhya, which is our topic, and Mimamsa. This link between Sankhya, represented here by the Guna doctrine, and Mimamsa, represented here by Dharma, is interesting, and this may be one of the unique philosophical features of the Bhagavad Gītā. Again, this link between the gunas and Dharma, between Sankhya and Mimamsa, gunas and Dharma, this is a unique link and a unique philosophical feature of the Bhagavad Gītā. The list describing the austerities of the body, speech, and mind reminds one of the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, in which the yogi practices celibacy, scriptural study, and speaking the truth. Now we're coming to a very important category, and that's knowledge. This is the Gita's epistemological claims, and this idea divides knowledge into three categories. Please hear this very interesting epistemological categorization. Now we're reading from the 18th chapter. Know that knowledge to be of the nature of goodness, through which one sees a single imperishable reality in all beings, unified in a diversified. Know that knowledge to be of the nature of passion, through which one sees through division a variegated reality of many sorts in all beings. Knowledge that attaches one to one kind of activity, as if it were all, which is not based on a reasonable cause, which does not aim at the truth, and which is minute and meager, is said to be of the nature of darkness. So this is an epistemological discussion of knowledge according to the gunas. This epistemological division is indeed interesting and offers a critique of different sorts of knowledge. The sattvic type of knowledge seems to be mystical, or that which is at times termed spiritual. It seems to unify reality and highlight the imperishable elements over the temporal one. In contrast, the rajasic type of knowledge is based not upon the unification of reality, but rather upon its division or fragmentation. Apparently, it is based upon the dialectical method defined as an argumentative exchange involving contradiction, or technique or method connected with such exchange. In other words, this type of knowledge is generated through a discourse between two or more different points of view about a certain subject, wishing to establish the truth through reasoned argumentation. In contemporary terms, academic knowledge may most probably represent this category. So I hope you can see the difference between this mystical knowledge unifying reality and this argumentative, dialectical knowledge building up truth by a contradiction between various points of view. The tamasic type of knowledge represents a third category of knowledge. Apparently, this type of knowledge is meager and does not have a universal aspiration. Rather, it is aimed at local and temporary aims, and perhaps concerned with bodily comforts or the like. The next section perhaps epitomizes the ethical aspect of the guna doctrine. So now we will look deeper into the top or the peak of the ethical aspects of the guna doctrine. I'm sure it's true. It is said that an action is of the nature of goodness when performed according to the injunctions of dharma, without attachment, devoid of attraction and repulsion by one who desires not its fruits. But action performed to satisfy one's own desires, accomplished by great effort, or accompanied by an exaggerated ego notion, is said to be of the nature of passion. An action performed without considering future consequences, loss or injury to others, disregarding one's ability to accomplish it, and undertaken out of delusion, is said to be of the nature of darkness. An agent is said to be of the nature of goodness when he is free from attachment and self-absorption, determined, courageous, and enthusiastic, and unchanged in success or failure. An agent is considered to be of the passionate nature when he is passionate, covets the fruits of his actions, greedy, harmful, impure, absorbed in joy and sorrow. He who is undisciplined, vulgar, stubborn, crooked, vile, indolent, dejected, and procrastinated, such an agent is said to be of the nature of darkness. Very important section in regards to the guna doctrine. So at first, the section looks into action. It very clearly equates the sattvic action with the dharmic action. The sattvic action is dharmic action. That is, action performed according to the injunction of dharma. It states very clearly that this type of action is performed without a desire for its fruits. And this very clearly links the guna doctrine to the Gita's central theme of action. That is, action disinterested in its fruits, as articulated in verses 247. This is also important in that it clearly connects the guna doctrine with the ethical ladder. In other words, tamasic action is refined by turning into rajasic. Rajasic action is refined by turning into sattvic. And sattvic action is further refined through the ethical ladder until it turns into bhakti. Following this, the section looks into rajasic action characterized by its performance in great effort, accompanied by an exaggerated ego notion and aimed at satisfying one's desires. At last, tamasic action is described. This mode of action does not consider future consequences. It disregards one's ability to accomplish it, and it ignores loss or injury to others as a consequence of its performance. The section next describes the agent. The sattvic agent is determined, courageous, and enthusiastic, unchanged in success or failure, and free from attachment and self-absorption. The rajasic agent is passionate, greedy, harmful, impure, absorbed in joy and sorrow, and motivated by the fruits of his actions. The tamasic agent is undisciplined, vulgar, stubborn, crooked, vile, indolent, dejected, and procrastinating. This section carries a potential for development into an ethical system, which could be applied in practically unlimited situations and circumstances. For the sake of demonstrating its applicability, we may apply the example of car driving and articulate something like this. Here's an example. I'm thinking car driving, something simple, and trying to apply the guna ethical doctrine on this example. So a sattvic driver drives according to the law, is considerate of other drivers and pedestrians, and makes sure his or her car is in good mechanical shape. A rajasic driver drives with an exaggerated ego notion, drives passionately and dangerously while being absorbed in joy and sorrow. And a tamasic driver disregards the laws, may drive a car that is out of order, being vulgar and inconsiderate of others. As mentioned, this could be applied in practically unlimited ways, covering various spheres of life and linked to a wide range of phenomena on the guna categories. Now, I want to return to the Chinese comparison. I feel that we may take help from Chinese thought, for Confucian thought, to understand the importance of the guna doctrine. The Chinese philosophy has the junzi, or the ideal personal gentleman, and one of my main arguments in this lecture is that the guna doctrine has a similar ideal agent, similar to the junzi, which is the sattvic person. Another way of looking at the guna ethics is by comparing them to Confucian Chinese thought, as in many ways the sattvic agent is similar to the Chinese junzi, or the ideal Confucian person. The guna ethics main principle is the sublimation of one's activities through an ongoing endeavor for self-correction and an aspiration to reach the sattva guna state, a state which could be considered also a state of humanistic spirituality. That is, a notion of spirituality attained through unadulterated performance of one's duty within a humanistic framework. Confucianism, too, furthers a notion of immanent spirituality that is similarly deeply related to ethics. Confucianism, no doubt, offers a profound sense of religiosity and spirituality, which may be considered in the realm of religious or spiritual humanism. As such, Confucianism identifies the moral or virtuous with the religious or transcendental. The Confucian discussion of human nature and the state of the heart and mind are concerned with life fulfilled in this world as opposed to life in other world. Similarly, it is concerned with the process of self-transformation or self-transcendence through moral cultivation and social engagement, as opposed to the possibility of salvation and release from the world. This is somewhat similar to the ethical aspects of the guna doctrine, which are concerned mainly with refining human life in this world through a constant endeavor for self-cultivation. In a sense, the question of how to become good in the Confucian tradition becomes as resourceful and profound as the question of how to be saved in many other religious traditions. In this sense, the search for the morally perfect is also the search for a transcendental breakthrough, breaking through one's moral limitations as an ordinary human being. As spirituality and ethics are bound together in the Confucian worldview, there's no call for an escape from the world, nor seeking of an extraordinary lifestyle of asceticism. This too is somewhat similar to the ethical aspects of the guna doctrine, which consider the gate to spirituality to be found in balanced and moral social behavior, as opposed to extreme asceticism. Very, very interesting. So I will not go too deeply into Chinese philosophy, but I will go a little further and say that as such, the Chinese philosophy advocated cultivating oneself to embody the morally good attributes. Confucius used the term ren, often translated as humaneness or benevolence, to refer to the ethical ideal encompassing the various desirable attributes. So that's very similar to the Sattvic person of the guna doctrine. I'll go deeper into that, a little deeper. The Confucian discourse on humaneness is related to the human potential and the constant attempt to realize it. Moreover, humaneness is considered to be essential qualification of a person of virtue, or the junzi. Junzi has been translated as a person of virtue, a superior man, a princely man, an ideal man or gentleman. Confucius expanded the term to signify the totality of superior human qualities and the embodiments of humaneness. For him, a man cannot be a junzi if he doesn't manifest humaneness. So anyhow, this is in many ways a major conference between the Confucian thought and the Gita, or from wider point of view, between Chinese and Indian philosophy. Apparently, both traditions highlight the position of the person of virtue at the heart of their ethical system. A deeper look reveals that being either a person of virtue or the sattvic agent is not a static position, rather, it is deeply related to the path of spiritual humanism. So now we will look a little further into intelligence and determination according to the gunas. So now we will look into intelligence, and that within the sphere of the goodness serves as purpose for liberation from samsara. As such, it discriminates between worldly involvement and its opposite of the extinction of worldly affairs. Similarly, it discriminates between that which is to be feared from, that is samsara, and that which is not to be feared from, and that which leads to liberation, and also discriminates between duty according to dharma and that which exists outside the framework of dharma. Intelligence within the sphere of passion finds it difficult to discriminate between dharma and dharma, and intelligence within the sphere of darkness perceives reality in a perverted way, thus taking dharma to be adharma and vice versa. Determination, which sustains one's psycho-physical functions through firm yoga practice, is considered to be in goodness. Determination required to achieve three aims of life, dharma, karma, and artha, for the purpose of enjoyment, is considered to be in passion, whereas determination, which cannot go beyond sleep, fear, sorrow, depression, and intoxication, is considered to be in darkness. So I'll read this section. This is 18, chapter, verse 30. The intelligence that discriminates between active involvement and inactive extinction, between what is duty and what is not, between what is to be feared and what is not to be feared, between that what binds and what liberates, is that of the nature of goodness. The intelligence that fails to distinguish between dharma and adharma, between that what should be done and what should not, is of the nature of passion. That obscure intelligence which takes adharma for dharma and perceives all things in a perverted fashion is of the nature of darkness, or parta. A termination that sustains the functions of the mind, life, air, and senses through a firm practice of yoga is of the nature of goodness, or parta. The termination of terms to dharma, karma, and artha, Arjuna, motivated by attachment and desire for the fruits, is of the nature of passion, or parta. The termination which a dull-witted person refuses to relinquish sleep, fear, sorrow, dejection, and intoxication, is of the nature of darkness. So, apparently the guna doctrine is quite flexible in its categories and perceptions of human nature. As such, it moves quite easily between the various components of human psychology and personality, and in this case, categorizes intelligence and determination. So you see the flexibility of the guna doctrine. Now let's look into happiness. Interesting that the Bhagavad Gītā looks into happiness and also divides happiness into these three categories. Happiness and goodness begins with some suffering due to the burden of practice. That practice gradually becomes more gratifying and is ultimately transformed into deep happiness. Happiness and passion is fundamentally different and is based upon immediate sensual and mental satisfaction, which is later transformed into suffering. Happiness in darkness is characterized by illusion from beginning to end, and is based upon a pleasure derived from indolence, sleep, and intelligence, and negligence. So very interesting division of happiness into three categories, and I'll share screen. O Bull among Bharats, hear from me now the three kinds of happiness, that which, following a constant practice, yields joy, as well as the end of suffering, that which starts just like poison, but is gradually transformed to resemble nectar, that which springs from the tranquility of one's heart and soul, that happiness is said to be the nature of goodness. Now, Rajas, the happiness emanating from contact of the senses with their objects, which begins just like nectar, but is gradually transformed to resemble poison, is known to be of the nature of passion. The happiness that deludes the self from beginning to end and arises from sleep, indolence, and negligence is said to be of the nature of darkness. So, very interesting discussion of happiness according to the gunas. So now we are coming closer to a conclusion. And before conclusion, there's a statement, important statement, that the gunas are all inclusive. So this is coming closer to the end of 18th chapter. And the statement is that there's no being neither on earth nor among the gods in heaven free from these three gunas born of material nature. So that's a very important statement, stating that the gunas are all-encompassing and no one can be free from the gunas, no, even the gods in heaven. Very interesting. So that's the conclusion of the discussion. And now the text is making this very interesting and important connection between Varna ashrama and the gunas. I'm reading 1841. O Parantapa, the activities of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras are divided according to the gunas and spring from their own nature. Tranquility, self-restraint, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religious piety characterize the Brahmanas as they spring from his own nature. Samoda mastapa shocham shantri arjavam evacham jnana vijnana mastikyam brahma karma svabhavajam. Heroism, ardor, determination, expertise, fighting spirit, generosity, and leadership characterize the Kshatriyas as they spring from his own nature. Agriculture, cow protection, and trade characterize the Vaishya as they spring from his own nature. And acts of service mark the Shudras as they spring from his own nature. So that's a very important conclusion, linking the Guna doctrine and the four Varnas. That's a unique philosophical step taken by the Gita, and this establishes a firm link between Varnashrama, Dharma, and the Guna doctrine. The implications are far-reaching, as one's dharmic duty, or svadharma, is not externally imposed, rather it springs from one's svabhava, or guna nature. Apparently, the division of the four varnas according to the gunas is external. Brahmanas have dominant sattva nature, Kshatriyas have more rajas in their nature, Vaishyas have more rajas and tamas, and Shudras have the largest amount of tamas in their nature. Despite these inherent differences determined by the guna constituents, their possibilities for human refinement and liberation are equal. Although each one of them has different dharmic duties according to their nature, all four types of people can perform their duties internally in tamas, rajas, or sattva. Moreover, ascend the ethical ladder through their own nature. In other words, a Brahmana can perform his or her duties in enthusiasm and change, in success and failure, and free from attachment and self-absorption. Alternatively, he can be passionate, greedy, absorbed in joy and sorrow, and motivated by the fruits of his actions. He can also act in an undisciplined, vulgar, stubborn, and procrastinating manner. Similarly, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras can all act internally in the three modes or ways. One who performs his or her duties in tamas is encouraged to sublimate them into rajas. One who performs duties in rajas is encouraged to perform them in sattva, and this is the state of performing one's dharma for its own sake and without an attachment to the fruits. From this stage, one is encouraged to sublimate the performance of action further, step by step, until it reaches the state of pure bhakti or devotion. In many ways, this carries the potential of universalizing the Gita. Everyone is confined in some ways or combinations of the gunas that externally define their nature. At the same time, within this external framework, everyone can adopt different internal attitudes according to the three gunas. The combination of these two components, that is the external and the internal, is the foundation for the Gita's ethical doctrine. Thank you very much.